I love reading. It's literally one of my favorite hobbies. This past year I've gotten really back into it, especially over the summer. So today we are going to talk about all of my favorite books, recent books that I've read, different genres, books I didn't like, etc. Have all of my books here with me and a few more that my phone is balanced on. I'm gonna start off talking about recent books that I've read over the past month or so. Just as a quick disclaimer, I just want to say all of the books that I'm holding up are going to be flipped around because of the fact that I'm filming with my phone, so just don't mind that. Hopefully you can still see and understand the covers. First we have The Alchemist. This book is such a classic. You might recognize it by this cover, which is more popular, but I couldn't find it in the bookstore, sadly. So this book is really a classic. I feel like everyone has read or heard of this. It's basically like a sort of like motivational, inspirational book about like following your dream, as it says on the cover, and like listening to your heart and stuff like that. It's kind of like a fable, I think is the word for it, or like one of those stories where it's like there's supposed to be like a deeper meaning to it. I gave it 3 stars. I think it's okay, but it was a bit disappointing, to be honest. I found it a little like wishy-washy at times, like a little too like spiritual and religious, which was not really my thing. But there were some really great quotes, as you can see by my tabs. It also kind of covers like the idea of like destiny and fate and like following what you believe is your destiny. I found it a little contradictory at times because it talks about how like we don't have a fixed fate, but then there's also like, oh, like everyone has a destiny that they're meant to achieve. So then it was like, is that also fixed? I think it's like a decent book though. Next we have The Catcher in the Rye, which I talked about in my last video. I actually really liked this one. I thought it was very like witty and clever, and I liked it. So it's basically about a teenage boy, Holden Caulfield, and his like adventures as he gets kicked out of school and he's like wandering around New York. It's kind of silly, like he's really odd, but I think it was like an interesting narrator, so I would really recommend it if you want to get into classics and just want something with like fairly easy language as well. That was one of my favorite parts of it. Next we have Poor Economics, which I don't have with me physically. I'm just gonna put a picture here, but it basically talks about, it's like a nonfiction book, and it talks about essentially development economics and like solutions to poverty and what's being done around the world, different like experiments and like RCTs. I found it pretty interesting actually, especially like certain chapters were, I thought, very well written. It is a little packed with like statistics and like a lot of studies and like a lot of information, and it's one of those books that you can't just like read all at once. Like I read it over the course of like a month, but it's really interesting if you are into economics. I liked it. Next we have Open Water, which I read this because one of my favorite booktubers, Jack Edwards, is always recommending this book, and it's also pretty short. I think it was like around 150 pages, and it basically talks about the experience of being a Black person in the UK. So it talks about issues like racism and violence, police brutality, but it's also a love story between these two artists. So I think the guy was a photographer and she was a dancer, and it's really interesting. It's written in second person point of view, so it's like you did this and like you did that, like, which some people don't like, but I actually didn't mind it. Like I didn't really notice even. Another interesting thing is that the protagonists are never named throughout the entire book, which is really interesting. I didn't even notice until like halfway through, so it was written very well. It's really just poetic and lyrical as well. The writing is amazing. I know some people don't like that kind of writing where it's like very flowery and like wordy almost, but I really liked it. I thought it was very well written. This is also one of those books that you have to read kind of slowly, partly because of the language, but also just to like really absorb it fully. I thought it was really powerful, and I would definitely recommend this if you're looking for like a literary fiction book that's still quite short and manageable. Next we have my favorite genre, romance. This is like a romance kind of YA type of book, Since You've Been Gone by Morgan Matson. This one is like my comfort book. Like, I love this so much. I read it first in like 2019, 2020, and I reread it and went through and like added some notes. So it basically is about this girl, Emily, this one, and her best friend, Sloane, this one, suddenly goes missing over the summer, and she leaves behind a list of these like really what she considers like Sloane-inspired tasks, so like really crazy things that she would never do as a very like quiet and introverted person. And it's basically about her summer as she basically makes a new group of friends and like goes through and like faces all of her fears, and then in the end they reunite and she's like developed into a new person. It's really sweet, and it's very like, the writing is really light and easy, and I liked it. I thought it was very cute and sweet. I marked my favorite quote with a little heart. So in the end, this is not a spoiler, so she says, "I know things might not work," I said, "and I know it's scary, but the things that are worth it are. It feels right." "What is that like?" Sloane asked, her voice quiet, genuinely curious. I knew the answer to that immediately. It was like swimming under the stars, like sleeping outside, like climbing a tree in the dark and seeing the view. It was scary and safe and peaceful and exciting, all at the same time. It was the way I felt when I was with him. Like a well-ordered universe. It's just cute. Like, it's a fun summer book to read as well. I really recommend it. This is a really underrated romance book as well, because I've never seen anyone talk about it online. Definitely recommend if you're looking for a more light read. Okay, slight change in angle. I hope it's not too noticeable. Next, I'm going to talk about my favorite books. So books that have altered my life, books that have changed the way I live, books that I think about every day and just draw me back, whether it's because of the writing or the storyline or just the vibe overall. I absolutely love these books. If you read anything that I recommend in this video, let it be one of these. So first one, I have to start with this one, Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. This book genuinely changed my life. I'm not kidding. Like, I love this. This is my comfort book. I have read this like twice so far. I never reread books, so it was pretty rare. So I first read this in April of this year, and then I reread it in like June-ish. And it's basically, so it's a memoir. I normally don't read memoirs, but this one is really funny and engaging and well written, and it's just like, it basically talks about her life through her 20s and all of her adventures, her relationships, her friendships. It's very silly and funny, and it's so good. Like, it's so good. I have to read some of my favorite quotes. There are so many. I'm gonna have to choose a few. I talk about this quote all the time. "A week into my big New York adventure, I realized that places are kingdoms of memories and relationships, that the landscape is only ever a reflection of how you feel inside." Which is so true, because I feel like when we go to new places, like, when you think back about it, it's often not about the place itself, but about how it made you feel when you were there. I actually have this quote up on my wall. So that's just how much it impacted me. I think it's really sweet. This is another one of my favorites, which is also, this quote is the reason I picked up this book after I saw it online. "I thought of Farley's laugh and the sound of my flatmates getting ready for work in the morning, and the smell of my mom's perfume in her hair when I hug her. I thought of the blissful mundanity of life, of what a privilege it was to live it." So good, so good. There are so many good quotes in this that I've bookmarked. I would read more, but I don't like reading out loud, and you have to read them for yourself to get the full experience. So highly recommend this. Really, really good. Next we have You've Reached Sam by Dustin Thao. This one is really sweet. I read this actually like last year in 2022. It's really cute. It's a like TikTok book, as they say, but I really liked it. So from a writing perspective, it's not amazing. Like, it is a bit of like a Wattpad type writing style at times, but it's a really sweet concept. So it's basically about this girl Julie, and her boyfriend Sam dies in a car accident, and it's basically about how she processes that grief and like how she copes with his loss and how it changes her life essentially. Also a bunch of really great quotes and just the vibes overall. I forgot to mention one of the key plot points is the fact that there's sort of like this magical realism concept where she can talk to him over the phone, which I know some people don't like those like fantasy elements, but I thought it was sweet and it was a really nice book. Also, the epilogue for this book is so amazing. I normally hate epilogues in books. I think they ruin the main story, but this one was just really sweet. I would read this as well, but it's like, again, like you won't get the full experience unless you read the story and the surrounding paragraphs, but highly recommend. Next we have The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Ignore the sticker on the front. Although, to be fair, this was a really good deal. Like £5 for a book. I'm so jealous of people that live in the UK. Like, you guys have such cheap books. It's insane. Like, especially at this store, The Works, there's like, I got like books for like £2, £3, and they're like new books in perfect condition. It was insane. But anyways, this one is like a, I guess magical realism would be the genre, kind of fantasy. I normally don't like fantasy, so this was bit out of my normal reading, but it's basically about this girl who essentially commits suicide, and then she enters this midnight library where there's a bunch of books, and each one is like an alternate life that she could have lived if she had made different decisions in the past. And she basically goes down these different routes and experiences her different lives, and I really liked how it explored the concept of regret. I think that's so important and something I related to a lot as well. I often regret a lot of my life decisions, but I think the message was really sweet. I won't give away the ending. Everyone says that it's really predictable, but I personally don't find it predictable. I rarely find books predictable. Another one of my favorite quotes from the end. Through the window, after the nurse had gone, she watched the trees' gentle movements in the afternoon breeze, and distant rush hour traffic shunt slowly along Bedford Ring Road. It was nothing but trees and traffic and mediocre architecture, but it was also everything. It was life. What? No, it's just beautiful. I love these books that explore how like the small moments in life are so powerful, and I love good writing about these kinds of things. So this one I really recommend. Obviously there's a trigger warning involved. Also, I need to talk about another book, which again I read online. It's called When Breath Becomes Air. This one was also a memoir, and it's basically about this surgeon who's like a cancer surgeon who gets cancer himself, and we basically go through his life and his experiences dealing with cancer. And really sad part is that he actually passed away before the book was finished. So I believe it was I think it might have been continued by his wife and then published. I'm not exactly sure, but really, really powerful book. Like, it's so powerful. I think it gives a lot of insights into the medical profession and what it's really like to be a surgeon, to work under that kind of stress, and how work in medicine is essentially like your entire life. It's such a commitment, and I think I really gained a lot of respect for people that work within medicine, because it's a huge commitment, a huge passion that they must have for it to really dedicate their lives to something like that. So I thought it was amazing. Really, really recommend this one as well. This was my other 5-star read of this year, the other one being Everything I Know About Love. Memoirs, I've been getting into memoirs recently. I'm gonna speed this up because it's getting so long. Non-fiction books, there's 3 books that I want to talk about. Firstly is Nudge by Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein. This one is like a classic within behavioral economics, which, like I said before, is what I'm intent on pursuing, so of course I had to read it. This was actually like, it was very funny. Like, they wrote it in a very like humorous way, which was surprising. This is also the updated edition, so it originally came out in like I think 2009, and this was published shortly after the pandemic. And it basically talks about, like, it's a good introduction to behavioral science, behavioral economics, and the concept of nudges, which are like small government interventions to promote a certain goal, to put it simply. And yeah, there were a few chapters that I had to skip because they were like kind of boring, which was stuff about like insurance and credit cards and just stuff that I personally did not care about, but it was a good one. I highly recommend it. Next is Atomic Habits by James Clear, which this book, like, you have to have seen this book. Like, it is everywhere. It's basically, I mean, like it says on the cover, it's about habits and breaking bad habits, making good habits, and it's a very like practical and step-by-step approach, and it's built around these 4 like laws of behavior change, which are make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. So it's also very practical. So he includes a lot of like tools you can use, or like how you can sort of like follow along with the book to build your own habits. I really liked the concept overall. I think I really like James Clear's writing overall. He also has like a newsletter that I have been subscribed to for a while. He also provides a lot of these like cool insights. I have another quote from him also on my wall. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. And continued. This is a paragraph from the book. But yeah, I really liked it. Very inspiring. I feel like I've said that about every book so far, but that was the point, to talk about my favorite books. And last one that I also wanted to mention was The Optimism Bias by Tali Sharot. And this is generally one of the best psychology books I've ever read. So it's very, very practical. Like, you don't need to know anything about psychology to read it. I read this like actually a while ago. I think it was beginning of 2022. But it was so good. Like, very funny, very informative, entertaining. It gave a lot of good insights into psychology, and it centers around, like the title suggests, the optimism bias, or like the human tendency to assume that we are less prone to bad things happening than those around us. I thought it was a very fascinating subject, and I really liked it as a good like introduction to psychology book. Lastly, I have to talk about books that I disliked, because there were some that I read this year that were just really bad. There were a few that I read for English class that I hated. Sorry. These 2 in particular. I will never gain back the hours that I spent reading both of those books, which is a bit sad. They weren't bad, I think. I just really disliked them. So, yeah. And then we also have Twisted Love by Anna Huang, which I know like the book community online loves her books and loves this book especially, but it was painful. Like, it was awful. It was poorly written. It was just weird. The characters were all so strange. I did not like this. I thought it was very bad. And then Normal People, which I didn't dislike it as much as these other ones, but I thought it was a little overrated. Like, I don't understand why people were hyping it up so much. Like, one thing that Sally Rooney does a lot is, like, she doesn't use quotation marks, which I found really like annoying in the beginning, but like you get used to it over time. It's a bit hard at certain points to differentiate like who's talking, or like if this is conversation or just like statements, but again, like, you get used to it over time. I think the characters themselves were very interesting, like Marianne and Connell. I actually watched the show first, and I watched it like in I think 2020 or 2021, so quite a while back. So I kind of already knew what was gonna happen, but I thought it was good. It was also nice to have like the visuals of like the 2 actors, Daisy Edgar Jones and who's the other guy, Paul Mescal. Yeah, him. I really saw them as Marianne and Connell, so they were great actors, but the book itself was like, it was okay, I guess. I personally did not love it, but it was fascinating. I liked the characters, at least. That is everything, I think. This is probably gonna be close to 20 minutes, which is gonna be a pain to edit, but it's okay. I actually really liked filming this video. I may consider making more in the future. I do love talking about books, so yes, I hope you got a recommendation out of this video, or just a book that you want to look into, perhaps read. I would be very honored if you do take one of my recommendations. Yeah, that is all.